Okay, so I'm going to talk you through the answers for the end of topic test on graphs and equations, and hopefully then you'll be able to correct any errors using your green pen and mark it as you go. Remember, you're going to need to rag each of the questions so that you can then fill in the Google form at the end of the lesson to show me how you got on with each question, and then a little bit of self-assessment about what went well and what you might need to improve on so that I can set you some targets for next time. Okay, so question 1. We need to complete the table of values for the graph y equals x squared minus x minus 2. Now remember, when you're putting this into your calculator, you want to do bracket squared minus bracket minus 2, and then substitute in the x values into those brackets so that you can get the correct answers. So you needed to work out that the first one was 4, the second one was 0, and the third missing one is also 0. If you have all 3 correct, then you get the full 2 marks. If you just got 1 or 2 of them correct, then you get 1 mark for part A. Then for part B, you needed to draw the graph, so therefore your plot should be in line with mine. So minus 2, 4, minus 1, 0, 0 minus 2, 1 minus 2, 2, 0, and 3, 4. Now, if it's fully correct with 5 or 6 of your points plotted correctly, so if you did make an error with one of them and you've plotted it correctly, then you do get that first working out point. The second mark comes from drawing a smooth parabolic curve, so that's a smooth U-shaped curve that must go through every single point that you've plotted, but it also needs to have a minimum point that is below this bit here. So it cannot have a flat bottom. If you remember, it should always be a curve. So you must make sure that it's curved at the bottom here to get that second mark. So there's 2 marks available then for part B. And then for part C, write down the x coordinate of the turning point of the graph. So remember, the turning point is where the graph changes direction. So it's coming down at this point, and here is where it changes direction, and therefore the x coordinate at that point is your 0.5 for a mark. Okay, so for question 1, out of the 5 marks, if you got 5, it's green. If you got 0, it's red. Everything else is amber. And then we'll have a look at question 2. So for question 2, again, we needed to complete the table of values for the graph y equals x cubed plus 4. So remember, you want to use bracket cubed plus 4 and then put each of the values inside the bracket to calculate them. And therefore you get a mark if you got minus 4 in the first one, and a second mark if you got 5 in the second one. You then needed to plot that graph accurately. So making sure that you've got the point minus 2, minus 4, minus 1, 3, 0, 4, 1, 5, and 2, 12. If you have all of your points plotted correctly at this point, you get the first mark, and then your second mark is awarded for a nice smooth curve that must pass through each of the points. You do need to be really careful that it's one smooth curve, and you shouldn't have what they call feathering. So you're not allowed to draw your graph like so and then go back over and have a few extra lines like that. That becomes feathering. So it's one smooth curve all the way through each of the 5 points to get the second mark on that one. So there's 4 marks available on this particular question. So if you got 4 out of 4, it will be green, 0 red, and anything else amber. We then have a look at question 3. So which of these is a sketch of y equals x cubed plus 2? And you needed to remember the highest power in this question is the cubed. So that tells me it's going to be a cubic graph. And therefore, hopefully you remember your cubic graphs are that sort of S-shaped, and therefore it's D for 1 mark. So on this one, remember, it's just red if you've got 0, so if you got it wrong, or green if you got it correct on question 3. Question 4 then, circle the possible equation for the graph below, and the graph isn't particularly clear on here, but I'll just go over it so that you can see it, but you should have it on your sheet. And actually the graphs where we have these 2 separate parts of the graph, so 2 separate graphs, are always reciprocal graphs, and that means it's a number, okay, over x. Okay, so it's always in that format, and therefore this one to get that first mark. You then have part B. So for part B, we've got the graph of y equals 2 to the power of x. So remember, that means it's an exponential graph. on that one. So anything with a power of x is an exponential. And we had to write down the coordinates of a. Well, at this point here at a, we know our x value is 0. So if we then put 0 into the equation, 2 to the power of 0, and hopefully you remember from your index laws, anything to the power of 0 is always 1. And therefore your actual coordinate at that point on the graph then is 0, 1 for 1 mark. Okay, so for question 4, there are 2 marks available. If you've got 2, it's green. If you've got 1, it's amber. And if you've got none, then it's red. Okay. If we have a look then at question 5. So question 5, I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger, is an iteration question. And we're asked to start with x1 equals -1 and work on there and find out just the next 2. Okay, so that means we've got our bracket here. So we're going to put the -1 inside the bracket and cube it, and then take away 3 and divide it by 8 using your fraction button, and you should get -1/2 or -0.5 for the first mark. You then substitute that into the bracket. Remember, at this point, you can use the answer button. So that will make life a lot easier. So if you use your answer button, that comes out at -25/64, which if you kept it as a decimal is fully accepted as -0.390625. So either is equivalent and you can have either of them. Okay, so it is 6 decimal places, so that's already done for you. We then need to work out the solution to 6 decimal places. So remember, it's a mark for each of those. And all we're doing at this point is, because you've used the answer button, you're going to keep hitting equals on your calculator, and you're going to write down the answers to 6 decimal places. And actually, when you get to the 6th one, and then, sorry, that should be the 7th and then the 8th, you then get to the same but at this point, and your final solution then is -0.381966. Okay, the process is exactly the same as the ones you've seen me talk you through. The only difference was this particular exam question wanted it to 6 decimal places, so it's just a little bit more fiddly from that point of view. Okay, but part A then, a mark for the second and the third one, and part B, a mark for getting this as your final answer, but you should be showing your steps as you work through. So for question 5, 3 marks available. Just make sure at that point, if you've got 3 out of 3, then it's green. If you've got 0, it's red. Anything else, amber. And then question 6. So on question 6, again, we've got 4 minus 2 over x squared. So we can pop that into our calculator. We're going to start with a value of 1, and this time it's to 2 decimal places. They made it a little bit easier. So the first one is 1. The second one then is 4 minus 2 over 1 squared, which comes out as 2. The third one, remember at this point, you can pop it in your calculator. So it's 4 minus 2 over bracket answer squared. That gives you 3.5. If you have the 2 and the 3.5 written down, you get the first method mark. Again, hit equals and you get 3.84. Hit equals again, you get 3.86. So if you have those 2 values written down, you get the second method mark. Hit equals again, you get 3.87, and equals again, you get 3.87. At this point, we've got 2 the same, and therefore that is our solution. So you need to state that x is equal to 3.87 for the third mark on that one. So again, if you got 3 out of 3, colour it green for me. If you got 0, colour it red. Anything else, amber. Okay, you've then got your RAG section at the bottom here. And as I said to you, what I want you to make sure that you go and fill in the Google form for me now, and then detail the areas that you think you need to work on. Also, if there's anything else you think would be helpful for me to put in the Google Classroom whilst you're learning at home, and then I will upload your targets for you next lesson on the Year 10 result sheet. Okay, do let me know if you have any questions.